Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas, here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Hey guys, thank you so much for rejoining us on Law for the People with your host, me, Eric Cedillo. We have our next and final guest, certainly somebody that we're interested in speaking with, who's running for City Council here in Dallas, Texas, in District 9, Ms. Paula Blackmon. Paula, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So why don't we just start off with you, Paula? What kind of got you prompted or wanting to run for City Council, and maybe just a little bit of background of who you are.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate being here.
Surely.
I'm from a small town in West Texas, and that's where my dad grew up. Brought my mom back. She's from Santa Rosa, New Mexico. Okay. And so that's where I was born and raised, lived there for 18 years. And growing up, we always were instilled that you have to give back to your community. You should always. And I don't know if that was part of, just growing up in the Catholic faith, or just growing up in a small town, or just that my parents, that's what they learned from their parents. Right. But I remember, I was just talking the other day that, every Christmas we'd go as the family and to clean the church, and we'd get Christmas money, and 10% would go to the church for Christmas. And then, you were always, what volunteer hours are you going to do this summer? You're going to get a summer job, but, I'd volunteer at the museums. I would volunteer at the swimming pool, doing swimming lessons. So I grew up in a community that also knew one another, and they cared about one another. Yeah. So it wasn't, you knew the face, and you knew the name, and you knew the family. Right. And so growing up in that small environment, it always has played into my heart to give back and to be that servant leader. And I can remember in 8th grade, we went, in Miss Griffin, who's one of my favorite teachers, we went to Washington, D.C. for that 8th grade trip that everybody, middle schooler, goes on. Yeah. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to make a difference, because I knew that that's where you can make differences for people, is in policies and political work, and how that's how you affect change, and that's how you can determine, and not really determine, but that's how you can create the communities that you want, is by the policies that are created in those chambers. Right. And I just saw that at the federal level, not knowing that there's also a state and local level, because that was the one. And then I ran for my freshman year for class secretary and lost. And so I thought, what,
tough
maybe,
defeat.
And that's always, young defeats are good. And I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't run for office. Yeah. And that's when I kind of just always was watching, the legislature, and staying up and watching returns, and understanding the electoral system, and understanding history. And lo and behold, Dale Tillery gave me my first job in Austin.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I worked for Dale as his legislative aide. He was a freshman. I was a freshman. We had no idea what we were doing, but thank God for that. I'm just a Bill commercial. The Schoolhouse Rock, because it's the same. Yeah, it's the same.
Show the kids those things.
and so you understand how the process works by just that simple song. Yeah. But then you realize that it is relationships, and it is trust, and it's having that common good or common look towards doing something better. Right. And then I just kind of took hold and started following, trajectory. Worked for Harriet Earhart, worked at DART, the Real Estate Council, then got into the municipal stuff. Right. But, coming from a small West Texas town, went to school at Texas Tech University, you learn the value of your word, your character, your integrity, and at the end of the day, your last name is all you got. Yeah. And my parents always said that, I don't want to read about you in the paper. You have to make our family proud. And my mom is still alive, and we all live for our mom. And I love when she tags me on Facebook, and she puts congrats all in big caps, and it's like, oh, my mom's still out there. And so I'm fortunate, and I know that some families aren't. And that's why I want to be the servant leader, to to work on those things, and I've always had that goal in mind.
Yeah.
No harm intended, bringing people together to understand things. I love having, because I grew up in West Texas, I have a wide range of friends, and that's what I love, because it's the different perspectives you get that shape you to be a better person.
Yeah.
And I expect that of my kids too. Is you need to have a wide range, wide thinking group of friends, because your way of life is not the only way that's out there. And sometimes we get siloed into thinking that everybody has it as good or as bad as I do. And I think that that doesn't bring for a good society. You need to have a good, diverse community, and that's what I want to bring.
Okay. What did your folks do when you were
So
growing
my
up?
mom was a teacher's aide. Okay. She after she had my brother, I have an older brother that I idolize. I mean, he was the athlete, and he was
Like my younger sister idolized me.
and now he's like,
She's gonna love
he's
that.
my biggest champion now, and so I'm very, very thankful for that. And I have 2 nieces, and so we're a pretty tight-knit family.
Yeah.
I mean, we just we talk once a week. We always, and so it's really good to have a family unit.
Yeah.
And then so my mom was a teacher's aide after she finished raising us.
Mm-hmm.
We lived next door to my dad's parents too, so
Okay.
it was. I say it's all very.
That's right.
And so she was a teacher's aide, and my dad worked in the oil field.
Okay.
So growing up in Snyder, that is where oil country is, and that is the main source
Like
of
a roughneck.
Well, he was on the rig,
Yeah.
and so they didn't get a college degree,
Yeah.
which they said that was never ever discussed of not going to college in our family
For you guys.
for me and my brother. It was, where are you going to go? And I wanted to go to UT. My brother had just graduated from Texas Tech. They wanted me to. Then they said, well, how about Angelo State? And I said, how about Texas Tech? And they said, okay. And I think they did that knowing,
compromise, huh?
yeah, they knew that they wanted me to go to Lubbock,
Yeah.
but they knew if they said Lubbock, I would have said no.
Right.
And so I think they were afraid I was going to come back with purple hair from Austin. But little did they know that I was going to be liberal anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
and I don't
purple
think
hair
that's
anyway. Love
but
it.
it's interesting because in this I'm not like really liberal enough, and it's like I just am not I'm not a yeller, and so I like to be thoughtful in conversations and
Yeah.
understanding, and so it's just kind of interesting because there's things that put out there, and my nieces will text and like, do they really think this stuff about you? So it's fun. The campaign trail is fun, and I'm glad I have a family that's supporting it.
Yeah. This is your first run?
Yes,
Or is
sir.
it? Okay.
Yes.
And before that?
Before
you've had a
the
whole-
secretary.
Yeah, you've had a
before
whole lot
running
of-
for class secretary.
Before class secretary, after class secretary.
Yeah.
I actually lost, I was a junior class president. And maybe because I won that, I ran for senior class president and I didn't win. And I know it was a poor job that I did as junior class president,
Yeah.
so I deserved it.
Yeah.
But that still haunts
Yeah,
me
it does.
to this day, so I understand kind of where you're coming from. You've had the opportunity to work in city government with the trustee's office and DISD. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that kind of either shaped your wanting to run or maybe kept you from doing it for a
Yeah,
little while. Tell us
right.
a little bit about that.
Well, like I mentioned, putting your name on the ballot and put yourself out there, you get scrutinized,
Yeah.
and you kind of go, or you don't go, but you go, what will they twist and turn to make the facts fit their narrative?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to go through that. Nobody wants to put their family through that. And so the kids had gotten older. They didn't need me as much. I got more confident in myself and more confident in my views and how to shape them and what I think is a better way to doing things, which is why I decided to run. I felt that I wanted my voice and my ideas and my thoughts known.
Okay.
I've worked behind many organizations, many elected officials, many appointed officials, and being an advisor is only that. You advise.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's their decision.
Right.
And I wanted mine to be heard, and I just felt that in East Dallas we were not. our community is divided. We have an east and west divide. And I really noticed that on the campaign trail, and I want to be that person that unites it. I don't want to be a person that is put in this corner or that corner. And again, people want to put me in corners.
Yeah.
But I really want to represent the neighborhoods and the community of East Dallas because I believe that I know how to get things done, and my track record shows it. Having worked at the Real Estate Council and working with them for Clyde Warren, which is now, I called it Woodall Rogers Deck Park, but it's Clyde Warren.
Right.
We worked to put a park over a freeway. And so,
which is an amazing success.
Which is amazing success. When they said, this is what we're going to do, I was like, we're going to do what? And believe it or not, people were open to understanding or to people getting more information and then understanding the process to do it.
Yeah.
So it was intriguing at first, and then how do you do it? And it was putting pieces together and people together to say this is possible.
Yeah.
And then going to working with Leopard and working on his initiatives, whether it be homeless or education. And then, Rawlings, working with him and getting him just set up. I mean, I worked for him for 2 years. People forget I've been gone for 6 from City Hall.
At the beginning.
Yeah, I was at the beginning, worked on the campaign, and I knew him prior to that from being the homeless czar. Yeah. So we worked on homelessness issues. And then I went and worked for Miles. And I felt that all those experiences has brought me to this point to be a better candidate, which is why I decided I'm going to try this. Yeah. And I have had, when I am a staffer working on an election, on a campaign, that's the first thing I tell the candidate is be ready to know who your friends are. Right. Because you think people are your friends and they will not support you. Yeah. I have been fortunate that friends from my childhood, friends from my kids' childhood, people that I've met professionally, people just on the campaign trail, they have all been very supportive. And at the end of the day, all the negativity, it gets weighed by it does weigh on you, but it gets outweighed by all the people saying, keep going, Paula, keep going. So it's like that marathon. Yeah. You need somebody there at that last 2-mile mark to get you through, because that's the grueling part.
Let's if we can, and I think that of course has a lot to do with you and your personality too. Just want to kind of mention that in terms of people, kind of being there for you and supporting you. That's a lifelong, I think, thing where you have those friends.
Right.
It has a lot to do with you too. Just
thank you.
Want to throw that out there. You mentioned the East-West divide.
Right.
In the district that you're running, if you could just kind of provide a perspective for people who may not know the area. I'm actually a District 9 resident, so
early voting's going on now.
That's right. Do you know that? I'm actually going to go vote this afternoon.
Good for you. Good.
So tell us a little bit about what that is. Are there differences in terms of practically what the East is looking for versus the West?
Right.
Or what are you thinking the distinctions
so,
might be?
just like we have in our city, we do have a north-south divide. Right. We have a Trinity River that divides northern and southern, and then we have a body, White Rock Lake, that divides east and west. Yeah. And White Rock Lake is a public open space, and it should be maintained as that. And I've never been involved in any activity that would change that, as rumor has put out there. But what is happening is you see this western part being, and how long have you been in East Dallas?
20 years.
Okay, so you're about the same. So you remember when Lakewood Shopping Center had maybe it had the Dixie House. Yeah. I mean, it in the hardware store, and it wasn't a robust shopping center like we're seeing now. You had Matt's El Rancho and No Play. I mean, you had some places, but it was still not. It still had a five and dime. It still had some interesting. It wasn't like we see it now. Right. And then you see also, too, as you come up Abrams, some of the corner shopping centers is not as robust as you see now. Big Shucks has come in. So, West Side has not always been what we see today. Yeah. But there was, real intentional efforts to create that vital, that vigorous economic development. Right. as you move towards Garland Road, which they've had a Garland Road vision, and they've talked about how to redevelop that. The garages are starting to move away. The tattoo parlors are, maybe a couple. Barbex is still there.
Yeah.
Now you have the Chick-fil-A, which means, you've arrived. And so the thing is that economic development is coming to corridors around the lake.
Right.
So as you move further east, to the far east, where it was a tight-knit community in the 50s and 60s that had a Luby's and a J.C. Penney's and a Sears it's by St. Pius. It's where you had robust commercial development for that time.
Yeah.
But as those big department stores have migrated to malls, and some of them are gone completely, it leaves a void.
Yeah.
And so, various types of shops move in, and communities feel the need for more economic development, high quality, places to go eat, and not just the chain. It's the coffee shops. It's actually small businesses to be relocated into the shopping centers, the vacant shopping centers, to spur their economy.
Right.
And so they've come together. They have a plan, and that's what I want. I want to work with that community to make sure that plan comes to reality. They have some transportation and connectivity problems. They've got a contract that has not been Gus Thomason and Ferguson Road for 2 years has not had the completion that it's needed.
Right.
And so that is not acceptable. It's just not. We've seen a lot of road projects that has taken forever to get done, and infrastructure projects. And it's not acceptable in my neighborhood. It's not acceptable in the district, and it's not acceptable in the city. It's not acceptable in others. And so I want to work with City Hall to understand what is the roadblock to getting these contracts completed. And how do we prevent that from happening again?
Any idea what that might be?
From what I've heard,
We've had some bond monies dedicated to
there
those
is bond
things.
money. Yes, from what I've heard, only 14% of the money has been put out on transportation.
Right.
So it's not a lot out of a $500 million. I've heard procurement is backed up, and they're reorganizing it and restructuring it. And I also think that the city council doesn't need to do at low bid. We need to look at bids in a more comprehensive approach, looking at what is the price, what is your minority participation, what are your past projects, are you completing them? Are you completing with the city of Dallas? Are you completing them in Frisco? Where are you doing business? Like understanding the entity and not just looking at one sole perspective.
Right.
And so in most cases, which is kind of interesting, the utilities is usually not well defined.
Yeah.
So so it is getting in there prior to tearing up a street and understanding the utility situation before you disrupt a complete intersection. And we saw that on Abrams Road. Yeah. And there was lack of coordination. And the lack what's interesting is they shut down Abrams Road, and then they're giving not Skibbon but Matilda some they're narrowing it, and so it's just encouraging our staff through the city manager, because that's how the process works, and through the assistant city managers of how do we help you do things better, and giving you that cover to actually think about that. And when I say block and cover, it's because sometimes the politics get in the way, and staff doesn't do anything because it gets a little intense. And so how do we make sure that they have the resources that they need to get it done? So procurement is reorganizing. We need to look at how we do our contracts and not just do low bid. And then we need to coordinate better in communities on how those contracts come to the actual moving the dirt.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that I've been in Lakewood area for the last 20 years, but I actually went to St. Thomas Aquinas, grew
Yep.
up in that area, and Abrams was a killer when they
It's
started doing
yeah.
the construction and the openings of it. One thing that if you do make it on the city council, I want to know why some of these construction folks who tear down the streets and then they fill them back up, those holes are back to becoming potholes within
Yeah.
weeks. I'm like, what are we doing to kind of make sure they're putting the right stuff
quality
in there?
control.
Absolutely, and that's
Yeah.
always been a big
Yes.
question of mine. So if you get in there,
and
let me
we've
know what's
seen that
going
on
with
Abrams.
Yeah.
Because I think one car went
My goodness, or
airborne.
The hills.
The hills.
that they. I'm like, who is not leveling
and you're
this
right.
off?
It is going back and making sure that there's a quality control before you sign off on the final check being awarded,
That's right.
and it's okay to close out. It is somebody coming out and holding the contractors accountable.
So true.
And that goes into when it hits public works.
So
and
true.
so and then making sure that because we have tons of bond money. So you're making sure public works and procurement are talking to each other and saying, yes, as public works, we have signed off on this, and that way procurement can close it out instead of just assuming.
Yeah, and a couple of issues that I really kind of want to get into with you, because you've been there, you've done it, and you've seen it from behind the scenes, and now you'll be kind of responsible for it. Kind of the relationship between, and it's always, DISD is incredibly important to me, and of course parents that are coming up, and the overall, for me, the overall demographic of Dallas in terms of where we are. What the makeup of our schools look like, for me, is very important. That interplay between council and DISD, I think it's one that we haven't really had that connection
Right.
that we should have had in the past. I think they should be certainly working together. And when you talk to them, maybe that's not my responsibility, it's not my area, but instead of that, a closer connection or working with one another, because a lot of the issues, the systemic issues that we have with respect to poverty in our city and other things, there is certainly a connectedness that we're not really looking at. Any idea, as coming onto the council, that you would have with respect to kind of unifying or bringing those two entities closer together or working with one another?
And I do have a unique perspective coming from working at the city and at the school district. And one thing that I've learned, and we tried this too during when I think home rule was being discussed, we tried to have more meetings between council and DISD, and that has not been as successful.
I remember a couple of meetings with Mayor Rollins when he
and
first got started on home rule. Yeah.
And the issue is that we're both in communities at the same time. And we both have huge bond programs, and
Right.
we both have resources that we put into those communities. We should look at better leveraging each other's resources. That is the whole premise of it. How you do that is the hard part.
Right.
And so my idea is creating an office of economic equity. Or economic opportunity, I'm sorry. And what it is it's not saying DISD, I'm coming to take you over, or DISD, I'm not taking you over, but it's leveraging those projects that we have going on in each other's organizations to create communities that would prosper. We all know that strong schools and communities create strong communities. That is not an unknown. And so how you do that is you ask staff to compare data. Okay, we as a city are about to put in X amount of dollars in housing here in this community. We're going to put infrastructure. We're going to build more sidewalks. We noticed that the school was shut down 10 years ago because of the lack of a population, or the population is down at the school. Let's work together to create this school as we build this community.
Yeah.
And I worked on a project called the Southern Dallas Gateway Project, which is the deck park over by the zoo.
Right.
And that's what we did, is we worked with the community. We got the money to do the park. And we're also looking at how do we keep people in their homes that will benefit from this park. We don't want flippers. We want thoughtful and inclusive development. It's an equitable plan is what we call it. But we're addressing crime, we're addressing infrastructure needs, and education is one of them. Yeah. And what we did is we worked with the trustee, we worked with the community, and we worked with the school district to figure out what was best for this school. because it was a school that was low populated. It was in a great building, and it has been refurbished through bonds. But it was one of those old buildings that was historic and valued. Yeah. So it was going to stay in the neighborhood. It wasn't. We didn't want to displace kids, so it became a K-8 tag slanted school, but it had priority admissions for those children living in the neighborhood. Yeah. And that is what it's about. It is working with it is working with the school district in the city to leverage their dollars. But it took a private organization. It was a private nonprofit that came together, that in a group of individuals that sat in a room and worked through the plan and talked it out, went and met with parents, had thoughtful conversations, and then launched it. Yeah. And that is what is needed, because half of our city is not developed. Right. And we can come into communities working together and work with them and not against them and build some pretty cool stuff. Yeah. It just takes time and it takes know-how. Yeah. And it's the right questions to ask. Yeah. So this committee that is created, it still exists. We still have that joint committee looking at bringing that back, and not just looking at how do we share programs, after school programs, but actually how do we grow communities using schools and infrastructure from the city and public safety in housing, in economic development, to really have a robust community, and it's looking at data too.
Let me ask you this, Paula, because I think lots of people don't get into the minutia or the relationships that kind of say, okay, this is DISD, this is the city. And I've heard a lot of talk, from folks saying, hey, we need to have this, we need to have that. What currently do we have in place at the city or in DISD that kind of brings that together, works with one another, aside from, hey, maybe we can share data, or we have a particular project, let's do this. Why don't we have perhaps a czar that kind of brings all of these things together? Or do we?
Well, I know that when Ron was mayor, they used to always meet. They did it the 15 and the 9, and they would meet. And we have this committee that I was talking about. And it is, the thing is I think we had a few trustees chairing it. People I don't know if they didn't take it serious. And that may be because there wasn't meat on the agenda, and that may be time that we change that. But that's the one committee that I really would like to resurrect. Yeah. And work with Dustin Marshall or Dan Mitchgay in my East Dallas area, or Edwin or Justin Henry, whomever it is. But and what we can do with that is actually give staff. So we have a bond office at the city, and they look at projects, and they look at how we're investing our bond dollars. Okay, those are the big dollars that we spend to really redo. And I put that we really look at how we work with communities, or in neighborhoods, or as a big city. The office, there's a strategic office in DISD. So they are looking at schools on how to launch a solar prep for boys, or even just solar prep. What does that look like, and where are those opportunities? Those need to marry, and we need to give them space, both figuratively and literally, to work. And we need to allow that as the body who governs this organization, as well as the body who governs DISD. We need to say it is okay for y'all to talk. And then we need to give them a platform for them to come back and to get feedback. And not in a separate, siloed fashion, not back at DISD and not back at the school, at the city, but to come together. And that may be that every, month, we have, or every quarter, the whole city council and the entire DISD board comes together to hear this and to have thoughtful conversations.
I think that's an incredible idea. And if you make it to city council, I'm
I'm
going
gonna hold me to it.
come back to you and say,
Okay,
what's going on
Eric,
with that?
maybe
What's
I'll,
happening
since
with
we're
that
parents
committee?
of Woodrow
That's right.
kids, you know, we
We can check into it. Believe it or not, we're out of time.
Are we really?
Today, we sure are. We've been talking. I've enjoyed the discussion. I've
Thank
learned
you.
a lot from you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we can talk more, have you on
I
as a
would love
guest
that.
later on.
I would love that.
Before we go, we
Yes.
wrap it up, why don't you tell the listeners when the election is, what's happening currently? You had mentioned earlier,
Okay.
of course, we're in early voting. When does that end, and when's the
All the
election
good
day?
stuff.
That's right.
So early voting is happening now and over through the weekend, and then 7 to 7 on Monday and Tuesday. June 8th, Saturday, June 8th is the election. And
Next Saturday, guys. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday.
And you
Get out
can
there and
go vote this
That's
Saturday.
right. That's right. You
but
can.
it's not 7 to 7. I believe it's still 8 to 5.
8 to 5.
And so I feel like I'm the most qualified in this race to lead District 9 and to bring people together to find real solutions to the complex problems that we have. And my background shows that I can get stuff done and I can work hard and I'm able to do it.
Okay. People listening right now want to learn a little bit more about you. Where can they go?
PaulaBforCouncil.com is our website, and our Facebook page is Paula Blackmon for Council too. And so we have social media and a website.
Okay, Paula, it was a real
Good to see
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much for coming out today. And thank you guys for listening in. Remember, every Friday, Law for the People from 1 to 3. Tune in. Thank our guests, all of them, Philip Kingston, Carla Garcia, and of course, Paula Blackmon for coming out today and spending some time with us. You guys be sure to tune in every Friday, and please, please get out there and vote. We've had some really low voter turnouts here in the city and unfortunately across a lot of the country. It's critically important that you get out there and do your civic duty and become part of the process. Thank you so much for listening today, and you guys have a wonderful
The
weekend.
law offices of Eric Cedillo, a professional corporation, a firm that handles legal matters in personal injury, auto and truck accidents, wrongful death, on-the-job injuries, criminal felony and misdemeanor, family law, divorce, and child custody. The law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas at 214-740-1628. That's 214-740-1628. Find them on the web at cedillolaw.com. That's cedillolaw.com.